And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey's Researchers Reports. Got a great show for you tonight. I'm Kerry. With me, as always, producer and co-host of the report, Miss Daniela Iolo. How are you, Daniela?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. And our guest for this evening, a man that needs a little introduction, coming to us all the way from Montpelier, Vermont. Purveyor of some of the most solid theories on Sasquatch out there, and creator of Impossible Visits on YouTube, Mr. Christopher Noël. How are you, sir?
Good evening. Good evening, Daniela. Good evening, Kerry. It's a delight to be with you here in the middle of the winter. It's about 10 degrees outside.
Oh, nice.
It's nice and cozy in here. So, and it's good to be among friends.
Well, we're so glad you came on. I just want to remind everybody in the chat tonight, y'all keep it clean for us as always. We do have the best moderators on YouTube. What was it? It was keep it cute or put it on mute. Thanks to our buddy Mr. Hilton from, I think he moved to Australia. Actually, he was in New Zealand. He's an Aussie guy now. He said keep it cute or put it on mute. He was going over some of the things I always say. One is, and we are live. Always do that. We got to do that for the show. The other was
I don't think it was me who actually posted it, but he said no, you can't do that because of.
Oh, that's right. Who posted it?
I don't know. I'll have a quick look now.
Okay, I'll look. Anyway, it was kind of cool. They just actually reminded me of it. But yeah, we're gonna talk about a lot of stuff today. A lot of stuff Sasquatch. We got a good hour to fill. But Chris and I were talking, and I think, Chris, you've caught quite a bit of grief here lately about the whole Steve Isdall thing. And the last thing we're going to do is bash on Steve Isdall. Chris and I, we've talked about this. We concur. Steve is doing wonderful things in the subject. He's got a really loud voice in it. But like anyone with a loud voice, there should be someone here, and Chris has pretty much been the only one that kind of holds our feet to the fire. Now, we don't disparage anyone here. You may hear me talk about certain things, but it's going to be general, and I'm usually not going to say their name, not in public anyway, calling anybody out. And it's always only ever my opinion, and when it comes to the subject, of Sasquatch, which is already contrasted and disparate as it is, there was something that was said. I'm going to get specific here with you, Chris. It was something that was said about, the one that I saw that I kind of agreed with you on was with Jeff Meldrum. Now, think whatever you want to about Jeff Meldrum. I think Steve called him Jeff Meldum, which is mildly, infantile, but it is, it is. Steve, it's. I don't think it's a reflection on Steve's character as a person. I just think it's how he felt. Belief is, I say this all the time, belief is a very powerful inception. And when we have certain beliefs that don't coincide with other people's beliefs, but it can get kind of hairy. But I think, what was said about Jeff Meldrum, who I think is an important person in the subject of Sasquatch because he's an academic. We don't have a lot of those, although he has, a specific discipline, that being, primate locomotion and pretty much primarily studying the feet and footprints of these creatures that they leave behind, suggesting that he was being paid to keep the true nature of this creature hidden. That's what I gathered from it. I mean,
yeah, that's what he said, and I took offense at it, and I because Meldrum isn't just going out on a limb and risking his professional reputation within the mainstream community of science and anthropology and physical anthropology, but he's not just doing that today. He's been doing that for the last 25 or 30 years before it was cool to be in favor of taking the Sasquatch species seriously as an area of study. And so, I mean, he has been one of the main pillars in terms of gaining a sense of legitimacy in mainstream consciousness, mainstream culture. And to just come on the scene and a few months later decide that Jeff Meldrum, who's been at it for a quarter century, is somehow up to some dirty racket just because he's in a different camp. He thinks that they are more like apes than they are like humans.
Right.
Is irresponsible and sloppy, and it's slanderous. And so I stood up against that, and a lot of people said, well, why can't Meldrum fight his own battles? Why would he didn't say anything against you? And well, it's a matter of principle. And I was surprised that nobody else stood up against that. But having said this, I do want to emphasize, I agree with you that we should mostly emphasize the positive contributions that Steve is making, most notably the platform he's given to hundreds and hundreds and probably eventually thousands of people who have had traumatic encounters, just like you yourself have, with the members of this species, and have until now at least felt that they didn't have any outlet or any place to be taken seriously and any moral support out in the world. So they had to keep quiet, which could increase the sort of severity of the PTSD that they may have experienced. And now Steve is, through this kind of appeal and the frequency of his availability, he's struck a nerve in a good way with all of this whole huge cross section of people out there, as he says, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people who know that these creatures exist out there and may have very different opinions about what they are, but at least they know they're out there, and they know that they are not being leveled with by the powers that be and the intelligentsia of our nation and the world. So he's kind of an insurgent. He's sort of a revolutionary, and I do admire that. I really do. And I hope we can get around to his most recent video where he excited me a lot by revealing the fact that he is able to be in touch with a figure who about 15 years ago or so began a very productive project. This is Adrian Erickson. We don't have to talk about him right now, but let's just put a pin in that if we want to. And it may be that since both Steve Isdall and Adrian Erickson are in British Columbia, and since Scott Carpenter knows both of these men, there may be a chance that Steve and Scott could persuade Adrian Erickson to release his long-held documentary footage. It's a documentary that is full of legitimate footage that I know is legitimate because I talked to some of the people directly involved 15 years ago. And he decided not to release this documentary because at the same time that he was shopping it around, Melba Ketchum released her study and got nothing but grief and ran into a buzzsaw of opposition from mainstream science and just vilified and tarred and feathered in the media. And so Adrian, who's a professional, he's a real estate mogul in British Columbia, decided, I don't need this. I don't need my life destroyed. So he held on to the documentary. But perhaps now that enough time has gone by, and over the years, nobody has really been able to discredit Melba Ketchum, especially on the mitochondrial DNA part of her findings. It may finally be time for us to see this important documentary. Anyway, that's my opening babble.
Well, just to kind of summarize and to be clear, no one's carrying water for Jeff Meldrum. He can fight his own battles. That's not the point. I think we both carry water for the subject of Sasquatch. And when it comes to Meldrum, he is a powerful voice in this as well. And when it comes to disparaging others in that way, that could potentially be damaging to the subject because of the way people view Jeff Meldrum. And to give Steve the benefit of the doubt, we have asked him to come on the show. He hasn't come on. Our feelings aren't hurt. He wasn't doing anybody's show. We didn't take it personally.
And we'd probably still love to have him on anytime, right?
Absolutely. He's welcome anytime here. He knows that. Scott Carpenter, who's a friend of mine, he's a friend of the show. He comes on. He's been on here several times. They're doing work together, and I think it's going to be great, what they're doing, what they're putting out. The whole point is, just because we disagree with each other, And I'm willing to give Steve the benefit of the doubt. You know, it could be some underlying thing that wasn't made clear. You know, it could be something as simple as that. A misunderstanding. These things happen all the time. But you know, we're not going to go on and on about this for the whole show. You have a lot of stuff, Chris, that I want to kind of dig into. Well, we'll get into whatever you want, but I have my own questions, and we will have questions from the chat for Mr. Noel about say the last 15 minutes of the show.
Well, I'd like to, if I could, I'm glad you have questions. It's going to be so fun. I'd like to spend at least 5 minutes or so just going over the basics of the Kentucky situation, the Erickson project, because a lot of people, when Steve talked about it, people were asking me and others in our group and other groups, what is this? I have never heard of it. Well, all right. Back in 2005, when I first started going on expeditions with the BFRO, it was exactly the time when the Kentucky situation came to light. And what that situation was that this woman named Sissy, living in a house kind of in the boonies in Kentucky, she used to feed a juvenile Sasquatch pancakes on a paper plate. She first saw this juvenile at about 40 feet in the tree line, and she started bringing plates of pancakes out to the bank of this catfish pond that they had in the backyard. And she developed this routine where she would go out there and say, "Come on, my little man, I got your food for you, little man." She had this little sing-song that she would do with it. She put the pancakes down, and 20 minutes later or 30 minutes later, never right away, but after a little while, she'd hear it coming up and listen to it from the porch, and she could hear it in the darkness. She couldn't see it, sitting down and, you know, munching away on these pancakes. Well, she later saw this juvenile squatting to pee, and she realized it was a female, but she didn't know that in the beginning. So anyway, she called the BFRO. Now, I know a lot of people have very passionate viewpoints on the BFRO. All I know is that Matt Moneymaker has always been very good to me, and he's done a lot of important work in the field. And Sissy, called the BFRO. They sent out some investigators. They became convinced through tracks near this pond, and including a butt print of the thing sitting down in the mud, that this was a legitimate situation. So Matt went over, and he hooked up an infrared camera and got film, the so-called pancake eater footage that some of you may have heard of this juvenile coming up, sitting down on the edge. And I've seen this footage. It's been retracted. It was Adrian Erickson later bought it from Matt Moneymaker, and it is part of this documentary that I mentioned that we need to have released. But you can see the thing in the dim infrared light, sit down on the bank, pick up the plate of pancakes, and then you can see it from its back. It looks like a gorilla's back, all kind of erect and broad and muscular, and you can see its elbows out there as it's eating the pancakes. Well, a lot of stuff happened after that, and I'll just condense. Sissy was married to a man named Roger, who is a skeptic and an angry man. And he didn't believe in any of this. He thought it was poppycock. And one day he was on the back porch looking down over the field, and he saw the male Sasquatch, who later became known as Big Daddy, standing under this fruit tree. I forget what kind of fruit it was. And it was standing under this one branch, and it was swaying back and forth. And Roger thought that it was a hoax, somebody in a suit. So he got his rifle and he shot over its head, and he knew instantly that it was no hoax when this thing didn't move at all. It just kept swaying back and forth menacingly, as though it had to sway, but be more menacing than just being 9 feet tall and muscular. It swayed back and forth. And later they measured the branch of the tree that it was under at 9 feet 2 inches. And its top of its head was just about at that branch. Wow. So it was swaying and looking at him, and he shot over its head, and it stayed there, and then eventually it just walked back into the forest, and then he knew it was real. That night, he heard his 2 pit bulls. They were down in like a kennel, like 100 yards below the house. He heard them barking and barking and barking, and then one of them, just like in the movies, went like, and when he went down there later to look at them, the one that had squealed and stopped barking had its head turned around. Its neck, he said, looked like a towel twisted, a wet towel twisted around, and it was dead. So what happened after that is that somehow Matt Moneymaker was in touch with Adrian Erickson, who is a successful real estate mogul in British Columbia, and he was interested in funding Sasquatch research. And Matt got in touch with him and said, "We've got a live situation down here." Adrian Erickson came down, sussed it out, decided to buy the house and the property. So I heard the figure $120,000 for the house, but made the mistake of not stipulating that Sissy and Roger moved like far away. So they moved about 2 miles down the road, and Sissy began calling her same sing-song call, and the juvenile switched to that new house. But nevertheless, Adrian and Matt worked to install 2 people at the house as researchers. One was Dennis Fohl, Pfohl, and I hung out with him on an Oklahoma expedition, and he's very, very down to earth, very straightforward and honest. Anyone who knows him will tell you that. And this woman named Leela, she is a PhD wildlife biologist, PhD from Princeton. So she's completely the real deal. And she was supposed to be kind of like the Jane Goodall figure in this situation. So she saw the Sasquatches on a couple of occasions. They got Sissy to come back, and Sissy, since she was more familiar to this family group, she managed to get some footage that's part of the documentary. And at one point, Sissy was talking, kind of making noises to the juvenile in the tree line, and they were kind of like squeaking and whimpering back and forth. I heard this from Dennis directly. And she said they were like going, and the thing would kind of whimper back to her. And then she saw coming down the hill behind it in the woods, she saw the huge male, Big Daddy. And it stopped about 20 feet behind the juvenile, and it went like, and the juvenile instantly ran up, and they both marched off through the woods. So this juvenile got truly chewed out for interacting with the human. So part of what they did in this, in staying for at least 2 years, Dennis and Leela stayed in this property and tried to get DNA and footage, and they got a lot of both. Her name, by the way, is Leela Hodgchick. They got a lot of both, including this is pretty disturbing, but it's what happened. They glued shards of glass, super glued them to the paper plate, and then put pancakes on top and left it out, and they got blood from that.
Oh wow!
But you can imagine that she healed up, but still it's kind of ruthless. But they got blood for that, and this blood and saliva from an apple and hair samples from the same situation all went into the Ketchum study, the Melba Ketchum study. The blood was especially valuable, of course, because it's the easiest to get clean, full genome samples out of. And the blood sample from this Kentucky situation was one of the 3 full genomes that were sequenced in the Ketchum study. So that's kind of like a thumbnail sketch of what the Erickson project is all about. And I really do hope that Scott and Steve can prevail upon Erickson to finally let the world see this stuff, because I think the stigma, I hope it's reducing, and Steve is helping with that, and so are you, Kerry and Daniela, and many of us are helping to make everything a little bit more smoothly absorbed into the mind of the culture in terms of Sasquatch.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, a lot of the stigma it's stuck on the name now, and the whole thing. Anytime anybody says Bigfoot or Sasquatch, the stigma is just attached to it. That's why
Yeah.
I'm changing it to bush natives. Gives it a little bit more of a natural.
So instead of bush Indians, like Mark is saying, we're going to do bush natives.
That could be offensive. Bush native,
Yeah.
Aboriginals. You not the northern North American Aborigines. Whatever you want to call them. We have to look at this as a race of people. I believe.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
I mean, obviously, it has to be that way, or because we know these creatures exist, we know they're out there. It's not, and it's not just a one-off. There has to be a viable, reproducing faction of these creatures, and who knows?
There's a million of them. There's at least hundreds of thousands of them, or else I wouldn't have a bunch of them right around me in one random spot in the middle of Vermont.
I say a million all the time, and people kind of like, what? No way. And I've heard some experts say, well, there's 60,000, and I think they were looking at counties and going by how many could be in each county, and everybody's got their own ideas about.
We'll never know.
No, but this is what I look at, and what people I think a lot of people don't realize is, and scale is a real big deal for people sometimes, especially when you live in your own little world. That there are. I use white-tailed deer as the example, and I'll ask people how many white you think there's 40 or 50,000 Sasquatch. Fine. How many white-tailed deer do you think there are? And just white-tailed. I'm not counting black-tail, elk, and all the other kind of types of deer that are there. Just white-tailed deer in the lower 48. How many do you think there are? And they'll come out with a number: 300,000-400,000, a million sometimes.
I'm sure it's a bunch of million.
It's 31 or 32 million.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea. If there's 32 million deer, to say there were a million of these creatures, because there's actually more trees now than there were 100 years ago.
There's a lot more trees.
Yeah, there are. It's not as it's still vast, and there's still so many areas of the United States where people don't go. I don't think these creatures have to be out there. I think they'll just sit along the edge, and they're so good at staying away from us and hiding. Obviously, we'd have a whole lot better evidence than we do. That they can just get close as they want to most of the time. There was to kind of jump off into your Sasquatch savant, your
my hypothesis.
Yes, your hypothesis of the what's the word?
The autistic nature of this.
See, I can't think of that. The autistic savant theory. And and I had a thought about that. And when it comes to that particular property in people and what it is, and observing and having the ability to observe and have like a photographic memory and remember everything, it's just kind of seems to be ingrained in them. It's not something that's learned. You made a good point about that. If it were learned, they would probably make a lot more mistakes than they make.
And they could choose not to follow what they learned if they had free will about it, instead of it being hardwired into their DNA.
But when it comes down to survival, because this is not the only creature that displays this, there are birds, like you showed on your video, that can bury. Squirrels do this. They'll take nuts and they'll bury them in hundreds of different places and remember where each place is.
Thousands.
Yeah, thousands of places. But I think when it comes to survival and the propagation of the species, it's important to remember that. So I think that may be part of the brain that's opened up just strictly for the survival thing. And I think maybe we had that, and every now and then it flashes back on us. So we don't.
Well, I think it's. I mean, some people believe that autism is kind of an ancient trait that makes resurgences now, like a throwback, evolutionary throwback, and it could be that the common ancestor between Sasquatch and us was like an autistic savant. And by autistic, some people think I mean a disorder or some like disadvantage, but I mean the extremely functional kind that is a genius at not only memorizing things visually and just in terms of information, but also the ability to understand systems and routines, to be able to absolutely know our own routines better than we know them ourselves. And then beyond just the mental gifts that autistic savants have, there's all sorts of behaviors that all kinds of autistic people have that are that have parallels in Sasquatch behavior, knocking on things, swaying back and forth, echolalia, where they repeat things back. There's immediate echolalia, where autistic people will often say back to you just what you just said, but then there's delayed echolalia, and many folks at habituation sites talk about, you've heard of this, Sasquatch using the voice of their mother, saying, to the kids, Jimmy, come out in the woods, and they go out there, and she's not there, she's back at the house, and they do this all the time. And they mimic animals, as we very well know. And so that too is has its kind of counterpart in our species autism. So there's differences between, if I'm right, that they have autistic, a certain cluster that is related to our own ancient roots of autism that come up in some of us, then it manifests itself somewhat differently, because our autistic people are sort of solitary, whereas they work in groups beautifully. They have an amazing amount of coherence in terms of their group strategy. So it must be that, like humans, our species is kind of like the other, that they find to be threatening and bringing chaos and destruction and jeopardy to them, and that they have to therefore both steer clear of and indirectly communicate with. Because the thing that also is very similar to human autistic people is that they're not just isolated and avoiding direct contact, like eye contact, but they also really desire, most of them desire to also communicate, but they don't do it directly. They do it indirectly. You can use cards, you can use a keyboard, and you can also use objects. They will build structures. The human autistic people I'm talking about, they'll build structures to kind of contribute order to their little microcosm world, and of course Sasquatch also do that with structures.
Well, play for any species, a lot of animals, even us, it helps you learn your limits. It helps them, you test your limits by playing. We do this growing up as kids. We learn our limits, physical and mental, capabilities through playing, or acting out. And I think it could be just as simple as that a lot of this is them testing their own limits and maybe exercising their abilities a little bit, with us. How well can they fool us?
Well, they also will communicate. I mean, like Snow White Bigfoot. She's been having a years-long conversation with them through objects.
Wonderful stuff she's doing.
And the same thing happens with autistic people. You can communicate with them, but not directly. And you're not going to have, unless there's a completely aberrant situation, you're not going to have direct communication with a Sasquatch. So, Mike Patterson seems to have some direct communication, but even him, they don't stand right facing each other. It's still indirect. And, I don't think we can think of a single situation, unless it's true that the Native Americans used to have direct communion with them. But I'm not sure whether that's literally true or just sort of a translation of the kind of, here's one of those fancy words, but like asynchronous communication, where you put something down, a gift down, and then the next morning you find a gift in replacement, but you don't communicate directly at the same time. It's like a staggered kind of communication. That could have been true all along. And it could have come down to us from Native American lore, translated into something more direct. there's some origin myths of Native Americans that aren't literally true. I don't think the Earth was on a turtle, but it's part of their way of kind of like bringing their existence alive through stories. So I don't know if it's always literal, but anyway, that's a digression. Where were we?
I don't know. I just wonder how much guns. I don't know. We're getting some feedback here from somewhere. I don't know what's going
I
on.
was just going to say, people, when we look at people who have autistic tendencies, I think we're all kind of on the spectrum, aren't we? Or we can be.
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah, and you get some really severe cases and people who literally cannot deal with other people at all. And so with Sasquatch, you'd think that there'd have to be also a spectrum because I can't imagine them all getting on if they're all at a particular frequency of autism. It would have to be quite a unique, where they're all on the same level of it.
Well, either there's a spectrum like for us, or it's their kind of autism is one that is highly functional in terms of, because autistic people are often geniuses in one narrow subject, like all the whole train schedule of the UK, for instance, or they'll be able to memorize this, or everything that happened on Wapner. Remember that movie Rain Man?
Yeah.
Definitely Wapner, definitely 5:30, definitely. So like one, and for Sasquatch, it could the narrow thing could be all they need for survival and evasion in their environment, and memorizing every square inch of their territory, so that if we try to trick them with a hidden camera, they see it just as if somebody took a dump in your living room rug. It's just like completely. That's a Matt Moneymaker analogy. I have to give him that one.
That's pretty good. That'll wake you up anyway.
You can use that, yeah.
Well, I just wonder how much guns changed things. I mean, they don't trust us, and probably rightfully so. We have, I don't want to say a nefarious nature, but we are capable of doing bad things to things that are not human. We do have that capability, and these creatures scare us pretty bad. Me personally, I had a direct interaction with one, but it was such a unique situation where I had been there with them for 7 years, and I know they were around, looking back, because I was suspicious that there were other people out there doing things, messing with me, talking, all kind of stuff, that so many things that I haven't even gone into with people that I can remember in those 7 years. And then I think they knew me. They knew who I was. I think if it had been anybody else doing exactly the same thing on the same day, it wouldn't have happened. They knew who I was, and
they'd had it up to here with you.
Yeah, man, they were fed up. I was doing things different, and they tolerated me for as long as they did. And I'm not sure if the intention was just to get me out of there completely, although that was the final outcome.
Yeah.
And and because normally their interactions with us are very obtuse. They're just not going to show themselves to you. I think it's an obsessive compulsive thing for them not to be found out, not to be seen.
Well, OCD is often related to the sort of cluster of traits that is autism. So there's something in there. Obviously, I don't know. I'm no expert in autism. It just, these things have come out to me. They've jumped out at me, these parallels, and that's why I wrote a whole book about it. What was I going to say? Right before you talked about your encounter. Oh heck, it'll come back to me. Sorry.
I'm bad about off the track.
Yeah.
It happens sometimes. Wow, this is bad. Dead air.
I know. I was just thinking, gosh, I'm glad I'm not hosting this thing.
Daniela and I, we've done a lot of these. We were talking about this the other day, how far we've come since we started. If you look at our first few shows, man, I want to take them off. I really do. I think Danielle would be upset if we actually did that.
And then you wouldn't have 89 of them. You'd have to decrease your number, and that wouldn't feel good.
Right. But I get asked all the time about the travel show, why we don't do that anymore. It's coming. It's coming back. When we get this expedition done and get that 7-part series out, the travel show's coming back. We're adding another dimension to the show with Mark and Melanie Zaski. We'll do our regular thing. We do interview where things happen, show people's best evidence, talk about their experience. You get to know who these people are actually, instead of just hearing their experience. But there's also going to be an investigation that goes along with it. So we're just putting Crypto Reality and Bigfoot Odyssey together for a trial. It's going to be limited. We're not going to do it all the time. We're just going to put out a series of those just to kind of see what happens with it. Hoping, absolutely. And, when it comes to, I say that all the time. I hate when I do that. It's such a good filler, though. Yeah, it is. When it comes to the expedition and what people are kind of not knowing what to expect, this is not going to be another documentary about Bigfoot. It's not about Sasquatch. It's not about bush natives at all. It's about these guys that will be searching for this creature and what they get and how they're going to go about getting it, the struggle that they're going to have to go through. It's going to be pretty dramatic. It's going to be more dramatic than the normal Bigfoot video where people go out and do an investigation and things are hard and serious. This is going to be a lot of, you're going to see the struggle, the failures, the successes. You're going to get to know who these guys are, what they're doing to catch this good evidence, what they had to go through. And I think we're going to get it. I really do. I think we're going to get some really good stuff. Whether we get the next Patterson Gimlin footage, I don't know. Get that at any moment.
The phrase like a human interest story. This will be the broadest human interest because it's human on our species and human in the Sasquatch species. Because in the umbrella sense of human, if Melba Ketchum is right that they're a hybrid with our own species, then they're humans too, just a different wild species of human. So this will be human interest on both sides of the coin. I remembered what I was going to say a couple minutes ago, so thank you for filling that time up and letting my brain catch up to myself. It is that I think my friend Thomas on Facebook, you're probably watching, and I wanted to say he brought up to me on a private message today his excitement about the expedition, but also his concern about, and I bet you have covered this, but putting out peaceful vibrations rather than showing your guns. And I know the guns are just for the hogs mostly and for self-defense, but he's concerned that they be most of the time concealed, so that and that you try to communicate as best you can with our fellow human species your intentions and your non-violent intentions. And I bet you have covered that.
Well, in the beginning of the whole thing, not everybody is going to be armed out there. In the group, there may be one person or maybe two, and their weapon will be concealed. It's not going to be for the Sasquatch. That's the one thing that we don't want to do, is to have them see that on us. But the main thing, especially in the beginning, is to not tip our hand and let them know that we're there.
Right.
So a lot of the strategy that we have planned are going to rotate around us interacting with each other, in the meantime looking for them. That's why the cameras that I got, the 4K Sony FDR 3000 are awesome 4K action cameras mounted on the shoulder that can be pointed over here, because I believe these creatures follow your gaze. They move when you're not looking. So these cameras are going to be ultra important for the capturing the evidence that they are actually there. We got the Zoom H4n audio recorders. We got 4 or 5 of those. We're going to have staged out all over. Then we're just going to go by and change out the SD cards and the batteries and keep them running constantly for the entire week.
So many people. Oh, so go ahead.
No, it was just there's a reason, kind of harkening back a little to why there's not the word Bigfoot or the name Bigfoot or Sasquatch in the name of the show. It's just called 168 Hours. That's it.
Oh, you're not doing a Bigfoot Odyssey subtitle?
No, it's just 168 Hours, because it's about this group of guys that are coming together, all different researchers from different places, and different people from different walks of life, all with good standing, all with good reputations, putting themselves to the hazard and trying to get the good evidence that we need to convince people, because we're not going to prove anything, no matter what we get. It's not going to prove a thing. But we can convince more people that these creatures are actually out there. And we're not going to do that just by going out there and getting good footage of them. We've got to tell people who these guys are. We've got to give some context to integrity. If we don't do that, people will a lot less likely to believe what we have out there. If we get that epic footage, it'll be too easy for someone to say, oh, that's a guy in a suit. Oh, that's just fake. They faked this whole thing. So we get people to know who these guys are. And that's what I think is most important about it, is knowing these guys, why they want to do this. And we've got 6 months of planning this. It's here. It's on us.
What was that? I know. I'm so excited. Finally, the time has gone by, and we're we're a week away from March, huh?
Yeah.
I had a fantasy that you were just saying it was in March, but you were going to do it in February, just as a head fake to anyone who might want to like intercept you down there. But no, I guess it's March.
Well, I will tell people when we're going. We're going March 20th. Is the official first day of filming, March 20th, because nobody knows where we are.
Oh, good.
We've kind of thrown people some screwballs there and made them think
right.
it's on public property and all that. It's not. Sorry about that, y'all. But nobody's gonna know where we are.
Well, so you've got less than 30 days, huh?
Yes.
Remember that movie, 100? What was it called? 118 Hours, about that guy who had his hand.
127 hours.
27. So maybe if you don't have the subtitle, people are going to think it's a sequel where that guy gets his arm for longer this time.
Well, I may do that. We may do 168 hours, a Bigfoot Odyssey. And since it eventually will come out on YouTube, and we'll put it on Bigfoot Odyssey's channel, but
I don't think the stigma is quite as powerful and negative as you think it is. Of course, I like the term Sasquatch because it has its roots in native language instead of tabloids. But
yeah, Bigfoot's been around since what, 58?
58.
Yeah, when they coined that. So no, I agree 100%. I do. But to me, the stigma is not on it with people that look into the subject. It's the ones that just dabble every now and then.
Yeah.
And that's what concerns me mostly about the whole woo situation. Even if these things are true, that Sasquatch has these abilities and does these things, from the layperson that doesn't look into this very often, and they decide, hey, let's look and see what's going on in Bigfoot. And this is what they come straight to. It can be a deterrent, I believe.
I know, that's exactly what I've been saying too. We have to streamline, and then we can bring the other stuff on later.
Let's get it out there that these creatures are real.
Right. First things first.
Let's get into all that stuff. Even if it's true, I just think it's a bridge too far too soon.
A bridge too far. I was going to go with the cart before the horse metaphor, but I like a bridge too far.
A bridge too far too soon.
Too soon.
Yeah, straight out of the gate.
Bring the bridge before the horse. Wait a second.
And I think a lot of it is from some of these experts. I've got one now. He's driving me up the wall, and I'm not going to say his name. He doesn't deserve it, but he is the guy. He is the expert. Nobody else knows anything but this guy.
Right.
And no, I don't think anybody's ever heard of him actually, but he's done this for 30 years, and he puts out all these obscure facts about this creature that there's just no way to know. And my favorite one, when I say the one that Bigfoot doesn't eat meat, it came from him.
Yeah, from him.
Yeah, there's absolutely no way anyone could know what these creatures.
They're actually vegan. They don't even eat eggs.
Right.
I wanted to have a big reveal tonight, and that's it. They're vegan.
They're vegan. Well, look, there are some things we can say and assess from assessing this creature that they don't do. Okay, they don't run around in traffic in the middle of the day. Okay, I'm pretty sure they don't fly.
They don't so far steal our weapons and use them against us. So what would stop them?
Right. But to say this creature doesn't eat meat and to know that, I mean,
well,
let me give him the benefit of the doubt. If someone can tell me, put it in the comments, how it's possible to know how a creature does not eat meat that we would know really literally very little about to begin with, then I will come on here and publicly forgive the guy.
the sort of chain of your outlook is only as strong as the weakest link, and that's a pretty weak link right there. I have another comment. So many of us are so excited about your expedition, and when it finally happens, it's going to be kind of like this radio silence, and we're all going to be like holding our breath. So, do you still plan to have the Blue Line guys go on with updates?
Yes, Daniela's going to come on every night. Actually, she's going to come on.
Great.
Come on here with the Blue Line guys, and we'll probably do some live remote stuff.
Remotes. Oh, good. I was afraid you'd have to drop that because you have so many plates spinning.
I think we'll have a few minutes just to kind of give people, updates of pertinent stuff.
Good.
I've been thinking about in my head how I'm going to present this, and it's going to be good.
Before you spend 5 months editing it.
I don't think it's going to take that long.
3.5 months.
Well,
Chris,
the good thing about
sorry, Chris,
No,
can I change the subject completely just before we run out of time? Because oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, you said no? I vote yes.
I know you put a shout out in your local area for people if anyone had experiences or sightings or anything.
Yeah.
What sort of replies did you get back off that?
Oh, I got an encouraging handful of replies. I have them in my my long wrap up documentary called Next of Kin Next Door. So I covered those responses. One woman got back to me, and within 3 miles of where I'm sitting right now, she saw one, jet black, walking behind some trees about 60 feet away in a small forest next to a hospital, the main hospital here. Another guy said that he'd been out tending his trails in his woods, and 5 times in the last couple of years on still evenings, in twilight, he had huge trees fall down just out of the blue. And one of my long howl captures, the ones that ended with ooh ah, the ooh ah shift, that happened in his same woods. And so when he saw that on my outreach video, he just about fell out of his chair. There's another guy who says he hears a mother and a child on the mountain across from him, and he has seen them in 2 different places in Vermont, other members of the species, but he's only heard the mother and the child, and I found that credible because he didn't overclaim. He didn't say that he's seen them. He just hears them, and that's just about 8 miles down the road. Another woman wrote to me after I put out both this video and a post in our local kind of online bulletin board, and said that her son and several other kids had seen one at the elementary school where my sisters went when they were kids, and they had a lot of details. It had some snow on its shoulders. It was looking at them from the edge on the playground during recess. It was at the edge of the woods, of course. I went and checked that woods out, and there are structures in there. So it was really great. It's a little discouraging in my Sasquatch and civic duty movement because it's not really taking off like I hoped it would. I still have less than 300 people in the Facebook group, and I do just about everything I can think of to do is try to inspire people to do their local outreach. I made up a brochure that I sent you a copy, Kerry, and people. I was hoping they would print them out by the thousands and cover the North America with them and various things like that. And it just seems that people in their busy lives, for whatever reason, aren't really taking it and running with it. So I'm expecting. I'm putting all my eggs in the basket of this expedition, Kerry. So
I'm hoping that, and when you came out with this idea for this, it's part of what made me want to do this. This is something that I've been thinking about for years. What I thought would have to happen, what I was hoping someone would do, and no one was doing it. So,
right.
You were talking about this, and I was like, you know what, let's just do it. And Linda wasn't excited about it for a lot of different reasons. But I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be good for me. I think it's going to be good for the subject. It's going to be a lot different than what people think. I think, than what people, the notions they have about what we're going to do and what we're trying to do. Actually, whether we get epic footage or not is not the important thing here. It's the people, and that's what I want others to see, is the people doing this. We're not putting our faith in the creature itself, although we are going to a place where we know they are. That's why we chose this area, because it's such a close quarter. They don't have anywhere else to go.
Well, it's good to lower expectations like this, but I'm expecting to, if not see a Patterson level footage, at least to get a lot of sense of the, from above, and then from the ground level, a sense of the movement of our cousins in the woods, and you guys' deployment and your terrain management, and get a sense of the ebb and flow of it, even if not, perfect direct open shot.
The equipment, we couldn't do it without taking the best thing we could possibly get to the equipment.
Yeah. Well, I've got plenty of trust in your preparation, and I'm very, very excited about it. And if the Sasquatch and Civic Duty and the March on Washington concepts can get a little bit of tailwind out of your project, that'll be great.
We're going to have a lot of footage. Someone was asking me, what if one of the other guys gets this epic shot? You're going to put it in your film. What about them? Not to worry. These guys get to keep all of their own footage. It's been agreed. I've got a full NDA that these guys have signed, and pretty much a contract, because they're kind of like actors in a movie. Whatever footage they capture is going to be theirs. We're going to use it in the film, but once it's done, it goes to them. If someone gets that epic footage, it's theirs to do with what they want.
But if you're having it in the film, then will it have value for them after that?
Yeah, well, their name will be on it.
It'll be known as the blank film, whatever name that
is. It'll be the new bill footage.
That's great.
Footage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and look, this is our show. We can run over if we want to. We normally keep it at an hour just to keep people wanting more, but if we can go over a little bit. Let's take some questions. I got one right here. You got one? Hiker Dave. That's the one I was looking at anyway. Chris, have you heard of any missing hikers in your area? It's good to see you, Hiker Dave.
Hey, Hiker Dave. No, I'm surprised that I haven't. But no, I sometimes hear of them in New Hampshire in the White Mountains, which is a very rugged mountain range. But I haven't heard of missing children or missing hikers right in my area. Maybe if the Sasquatch are to blame for these, then maybe they're a little bit more docile around here. I mean, that's why we're not known as a hot spot, even though I know from my research that their range comes right through here, and they do a lot around here, especially in June and July and August. Again, if anyone wants to see what evidence I've been able to collect over the last 2 seasons, one video is called "At the Sasquatch Keyhole." There's a lot of audio and video, and then the more recent one is called "Next of Kin, Next Door," a documentary on the new wave of Sasquatch research. And by that, I just mean the new wave is people more and more realizing how close to our civilization they habitually operate.
Got one here from 5 Hazel. Please tell us your most scary encounter.
Well, the 2 times I filmed one, once in Texas and once here in Vermont, I didn't realize I was filming them at the time, so that wasn't scary. I guess it would be when I was sleeping, camping out by myself on this mountain in Marshfield. Yeah, in Marshfield. And all of a sudden I wake up to this sound of and I looked up, and it was a starry night, so I could see the stars above, so I could just see the shadow of the tree, and I could see that it was falling parallel to me instead of across me. So that wasn't as scary as if it had been the other way around. And it landed 6.5 feet away from me, bang! And I have it all on audio.
Wow.
And I listened to at the time, I wasn't 100% sure that it was Sasquatch. So the next day I listened to the audio, of course, and you can hear about 2 minutes before that, you can hear something pounding on the turf as if trying to wake me up, and you can hear me. and I wouldn't wake up. And so it pounds a few times in the turf, and then a minute and a half later, you hear like not rotten wood, but rather, very solid wood, crack, with some pressure against it. And then like another 35 seconds go by, and I don't wake up. And then you're bang.
You wouldn't shut up.
I wouldn't wake up. Maybe it was tired of my snoring, or maybe it just
If you were snoring, man. They couldn't get any sleep. They were trying to get you to, hey, man.
Maybe that is what it is. I figured they wanted me to get the hell out of there, and they were just trying to intimidate me. But I was a mile and a half away from my car, up a huge mountain, and I just went back to sleep. What can I do? Because you know how you second guess yourself. I was thinking, well, it was probably a bear climbed up there, and it was heavy, and the thing fell down. But then when I listened to the recorder, there's no climbing sound. Just what I described to you. Just no climbing up the tree. It wasn't a raccoon or a bear or anything.
For you guys that are watching on Facebook, you kind of have some hoops you got to jump through for us to see your name. We don't know who this is. So if you don't do that, just put your name on there so we'll know who you are next time. But this one is what happens if one attacks you? Do you have a plan? I have a plan.
Yeah, I think it's probably directed at Kerry because I don't sleep out by myself anymore.
Yes. I have a rape whistle. No, I'm kidding. Run like hell. That's going to be pretty much it. Bear spray. We're gonna have bear spray. Although I think that might be taken possibly as bad as a gun. To do that, to do anything to hurt one, I think because we're going to be outnumbered without a doubt. I think it's not their nature to do that, to just attack. We would think we would really have to upset them a lot, and we don't plan to go to such lengths.
If they have juveniles around, you might come between them without knowing it.
But we know we're using that thermal drone to do recon, so we're gonna for most of that stuff where we think we're gonna go into these places after them, we're gonna have the drone there first. And if we see there's 7 of them there and there's all these apexes and they're 8 feet tall, we'll probably think twice about going in. Just saying.
Maybe not.
Mark's asking a situation like that where there were that many. This one is there, and all of a sudden, right behind him, 5 more stand up, and all you see is all these apexes, and they're all.
That's an amazing description he had of that.
Yeah, on thermal. So,
did you see the footage?
I saw the thermal footage of the one that because Mark's didn't record.
Yeah, right.
Brian's did, and when Brian got over there, you can see the thing. He's coming down like this, and I mean it's right there, 15 feet away, very clear. You can see the hair, you see the apex, you see this large dark thing because I think he's got it set to
black hot,
yeah, and you just see it coming down.
If it makes any difference for your choice, it probably won't. But I have one vote for white hot. I like that best.
I'm going to be using different palettes. The thermal that we have.
Do you remember the Michael Green thermal footage?
Yeah.
He forgot to focus it, so it's all fuzzy, but you can see the whole shape and everything, and that's white. I love that footage. Anyway, Chris, what do you think about the pine cone? What do you think about the pine cones? Throw it at well, many people experienced this. And this was back in 2015, and for
direct interaction right there.
For several days in a row, whenever I would go there first thing in the morning, sometimes when I put my first foot on the path leading into this ravine, right in front of my foot would land a pine cone from arcing in from somewhere. It's hard to tell where they come from with thick trees, but it would just land right in front of me, and I would laugh and feel welcomed. Some people said, "Oh, they were trying to get you out of there. It was an aggressive thing." I never felt that way. I think they were playing catch. And on 2 occasions, I saw where where they came from, like 150 feet away. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
If you're picturing pine cones that are kind of like have spaces between the little, what do you call them? These were not. These were dense and green and really heavy, and you can throw these a long way if you're strong. So from like 100, 150 feet away, there was this line of trees, and I saw on 2 occasions this pine cone shoot up from behind there. And, you know, I do kind of regret not running over there and trying to see it, but I think once I took 3 steps, he would have been gone. And I could see it arcing up through the sky and hitting the tree I was sitting next to, and then they would land right next to me. And sometimes it would be like 10 of them in a minute. It was incredible. And of course, I looked up and there were no squirrels above me. And anyway, a squirrel wouldn't be likely to throw overhand from behind 150 feet away. So they weren't squirrels. And I never got a video of these objects rising up from the ground level, which would have been primo. But I did get one angling down from the sky. And so that I was at least happy about that. But I was thrilled, Rick. I was thrilled with that experience because it felt like, I mean, I was touching a pine cone that several seconds earlier had been in the hand of a Sasquatch, and I knew this 100%. And some people say, "Oh, it was some guy, you know, throwing these things at you." Well, if it's a guy, a human guy, then he's very persistent. Because I would leave the recorder there for hours and come back later and listen to the whole file, and these pine cones would continue to hit the trees, not dropping from vertical, but hitting the trunks of the trees, bang, bang, for hours after I was there. So this would have been one tenacious hoaxer.
Nobody that accurate. Tom Brady is not that accurate.
Not quite that accurate, no.
Well, because when you told him to hit you.
Yeah, I did. It's like, can you hit me one of those? And then 2 minutes later,
hits you right in the head. That's crazy. That's insane.
And that happened even after it had to bounce through some branches because it wasn't a direct shot.
Right.
It still hit me. That's some aim for you.
Yeah, whatever that was, the Sasquatch, 150 feet is not a short distance to throw anything repeatedly.
I know.
So yeah, that's an arm. Plus the way it was coming down to throw it up and then moonshot. Yeah, that's
just 80 feet and arc down because of the way the trees were.
That is incredible.
Any other questions?
Let's take one more. Let's do that.
Have you got one?
I'm looking.
Well, kind of this one. Well, I think we've kind of covered that. Maybe that going off. Well, you can answer that anyway.
Well, I mean, I saw a documentary about autism like about 6 years ago or something, and the more aspects they would cover, the more I thought that's kind of like what Sasquatch does, and that's kind of like what Sasquatch does, and then I read a whole bunch about it, a lot of memoirs by people with autism, including Temple Grandin and Dawn Prince Hughes, who has a great book called The Songs of the Gorilla Nation, where she, for the first time in her life, felt that she could commune with another person, as she says, when she was with the gorillas at the San Diego Zoo, because they had a similar kind of way of being as her, not direct, but just with each other, just parallel with each other. And that reminded me too of Sasquatch. And then the more things just kind of fell into place. I go into this theory a bit in the video that Kerry has been alluding to. It's the most recent one where it's Steve Isdall's excellent question and a possible answer. And I also have a book called The Sasquatch Savant Theory, if anyone's into books.
Yeah, we're gonna link your books here if anybody wants to check out Mind Speak and the Sasquatch Savant, the books that you have. We're gonna link those in the
thank you,
in the description. So
yeah, we didn't even get into Mind Speak, but we're over time now.
Yeah, something for the next time you come.
There you go.
But hey, it's been a great show, and thank you everybody for coming out tonight. We certainly do appreciate it. It's been a good crowd, almost 270 there at one point. Steve Isdall, we love you. Don't stop doing what you're doing, and don't think that we're hating.
If he probably won't see this, but if someone wants to tell him that if he wants to come on, we would love to have him. I don't have to be part of it, but I'd love to be on with him, and we can have a friendly discussion.
Absolutely. And like I said, could have been a simple misunderstanding. Just things get stated the wrong way and taken the wrong way sometimes. So you just never know until you ask. But I don't think you were wrong, Chris, and I don't think that Steve's nature is to be is to hurt anybody in this. He's got his own opinion, and whether a lot of people value it. Obviously, he's got a very loud voice in this. So, hey,
although by the same token, I don't want to be too conciliatory and forgiving. He did say that anyone who charges any money whatsoever to teach people about Sasquatch is a fraud. And that's another one of my videos, because I'm not a fraud. And the dozens and dozens of people I've worked with in the BFRO, whatever some few of them have done that are bad, that is bad, these people are honest and sincere, have spent years researching, and they take people out and they teach them a lot about Sasquatch. And lots of times the people who go on these expeditions and pay some money experience an interaction with Sasquatch that they never otherwise would. And they're thrilled and they feel it's worth every penny. So we're not a fraud.
Say that, the free market usually regulates these things. Someone doesn't want to pay that money to have this experience, and if they do go out and they feel like they've been defrauded, you're going to hear about it.
Right.
And I haven't heard anything like that. So I mean, yeah, that's another one of those things.
So I do sometimes think he has a mean spirit. We don't have to give him all the credit in the world, but he, like all of us, can learn to expand his viewpoint. And if he comes on, I can explain some stuff, and he can explain what he means by some of the accusations he's made, and we can come to common ground.
Let's do that, if you will. Invitations out there, Steve. If you happen to see this, it's wide open. But hey, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Daniela, great show as always. Christopher, you are wonderful as always.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate your support and your friendship.
You betcha. My pleasure. 100%. We will see you guys Wednesday, 7:00 p.m. Central. For
Blue Line Wednesday.
Blue Line Bigfoot, guys. We got some
Those guys are going to become very important along about March 20th.
I don't know. I don't know if you're going to do any regular researchers reports while we're gone, Daniela, or if you're just going to come on nightly with the live updates or whatever. But I'll leave that for you guys to work out.
Yeah. We'll be coming on every night with an update of what's been going on down where you are, and cool. Mix it up with the researchers report. We'll work it out, but we're going to be running there alongside of you lot.
That's going to be so much fun.
Doing it.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, this Wednesday, 7:00 p.m. Central, Blue Line Bigfoot. We'll have some good stories for you guys, and we'll sit around and make fun of ourselves. And I think we got Kim Schapper coming on at some point after that. Maybe next Saturday, possibly. I don't know.
Next Saturday, but we'll get Kim on the next Wednesday.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Cool deal. Well, y'all have a good night. Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, y'all.